Welcome everybody to the live Q&A with Dr. Rob. And so we are going to get started. I'll shift this one to the answered. So betrayed partner here, married 7 years. My mother enmeshed sex addict husband acted out with several women who are significantly older and larger than me. Could this be a fetish or mother enmeshed related? That's a great question. What are your thoughts?
Well, please excuse the language, there are people who are interested in larger people, and there's actually a term for them called chubby chasers is the word for them. And it can be fetishistic for some people, and for other people it could just be part of what they're interested in, and maybe there's other things as well. It is not considered to be a pathology or a deeply encouraged, it's no more pathology than someone who might like leather or feet, or you may not be into that sort of thing, but it's considered to be non-pathological. And why someone has a fetish, there's lots of reasons. I think I could be real technical about that, but the truth is that it may or may not have anything to do with his mother. It could have had something that happened to him at camp or at school, or it really it's dependent on a set of experiences, but it doesn't necessarily have to be with a certain person, if that helps any.
So how would somebody, so one of the things I was questioning is, does that resemble more his mother, first of all, but how would somebody start unpacking that? I mean, how do you even, how do you decide if that's part of a mother enmeshment or what?
Well, I don't think it matters. I mean, I'm into men, I'm a homosexual. Is there any reason to unpack why I'm a homosexual? Not really. It's not going to change anything. So if I'm into feet or leather, or, I now have a client who we spent, many years ago, and for some reason he had he had a foot fetish, and he remembered an experience that he had with an older woman, which he found arousing at a very young age, and it had to do with feet. And he remembered it. He remembered becoming aroused, and he remembered becoming a young man. And for whatever reason, that imprinted, if you will. But it could have been his mother, could have been his sister, could have been his grandmother. It really was about the experience that he had. It didn't, which was powerful. It didn't necessarily have to be his mother. But in mother enmeshment has all of its own problems.
Yeah,
with it.
absolutely. Okay, so the next question I'm going to put in answered. Is it common for a sex addict to use porn for years and immediately go from that to a physical, emotional affairs? There were no one night stands and multiple partners. My husband made sure to spend time before and after the sexual experience with one lady for 6 years and another for 2. Also, he never experienced any guilt about what he was doing or any disappointment or let down after the sex. How is that even possible? The only person I have heard say that some skip this stage of the addiction cycle is Michelle Mays in a workshop we attended. Is this normal?
Well, that's a whole bunch of questions.
Yeah.
But let me see if I can answer a couple of them. I don't necessarily believe your husband that he only looked at porn and then all of a sudden went to one night stands. I think that can be a fairly consistent behavior. I would imagine he doesn't want you to know that. So listen, I'm a sex addict professional. That's where my head goes, is how is he lying? Some people do escalate. But they don't escalate like in 5 minutes. I think Tommy would agree. You don't look at all this and get into all that, and then the next day you decide you're into something else. It's more like someone will look at something and think about something, and maybe they'll play with it online for a while, and then they chat with somebody, and it doesn't just happen that they also become multiple partners and affairs. And that's why I question what you're being told. Sorry about that. You said my husband made sure to spend time and before after the experience with one lady for 6 years. Yeah, he was having affairs. I mean, that's what you call plain old affairs. And I would suggest that he was looking at the porn and having the affairs at the same time. And that's not unusual at all. And I can go into details, but I'm going to make sure we answer every question tonight, Tammy. The fact that he didn't experience, I would disagree with Michelle, although we are very good friends and I like her. There are many addicts who skip the guilt and depression stage altogether because they go from acting out to beginning to feel a bit bad about it, back to the acting out. And it becomes a cycle that avoids shame or remorse or guilt. So some people are so into it and they're doing it so frequently or with such intensity that they don't feel any guilt because they go from one experience to the other. And I can tell you for myself, when I was an active sex addict, that after a number of years, I didn't feel bad about it at all. In the beginning, maybe. Now, I wasn't necessarily cheating on a long-term committed partner. I don't think I was. But nonetheless, the idea in the beginning may be shameful. I can say shameful and depressed. And I remember at one point not knowing if I acted out to feel bad about myself or if I felt bad, and that's why I acted out. I never could actually, and then I got sober and realized it was the acting out that made me feel bad. But nonetheless, I don't think it was for anyone else. I think it was for me and my unhappiness and what was wrong with me and why couldn't I stop. And so I do think sometimes there are bad feelings, but they're not the kind of ones that you would want as a spouse for someone to feel if they felt bad about what they were doing. Hey, Tammy, what do you think?
Well, the thing that caught me was with one lady, and I was like, wow, you're being kind, because like yeah, somebody had I wouldn't use as kind of a term probably for that. So, but no, I agree with what you're saying. And it's so painful. The one night stands can be a tiny bit easier because it's more transactional rather than, this emotional, and he's, wanting to spend time with them and all that, so my heart goes out to you. So next question, Rob, thank you for taking time to answer difficult questions for those seeking their own healing. I've struggled with pornography for my entire sexual life. I grew up in a dysfunctional household where my father's own pornography addiction was present and greatly affected me. I've been through the underbelly of porn addiction from yeah, it wasn't all caps.
PIED.
Yeah, I know. It was porn-induced erectile dysfunction to warping sexual taste, and I've seen the dark side of the human sexuality and carried a lot of shame for this into my entire adult life. I'm still struggling to leave porn behind, but I'm grateful to no longer be acting out with fetishized material. I've done a lot of self-work, and it's paying off in some respects. That said, I'm writing to you because there really is only one area of my sexual template that causes me a lot of shame and stress. I find teenage girls attractive, and despite prolonged periods of time away from pornography, I can't deny some 15, 16-year-olds will still catch my eye.
So here's the question. If a 15 or 16-year-old female is mature and has breasts, every man finds her attractive. Just because it's not like automatic, we're looking at someone saying, oh, they're 18, I'm attracted to them. Men and women both like youth. YOUTH in particular, it's one of the most searched for terms in porn. I don't know if you knew that, Tammy, along with mother, by the way. Youth is one of those, and actually I think that's quite biological. We want to mate with young people so we can have babies. So I think that there's a biological testosterone related thing that comes with that. But nonetheless, just because you're attracted to someone doesn't mean you're going to have sex with them. I've had fathers say, oh, for a minute, I thought my daughter was attractive. That's normal. You see an undressed person in front of you now I'm not saying dads should be that interested in their daughters. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that men are aroused by people who are under 18, who are fully developed, because they're fully developed, not because they're any particular age. So I think to blame yourself or call that a fetish would be to be unfair to yourself. However, if you're chatting young people up or looking at child porn or that's very different than seeing a bunch of young high school students on the beach and thinking, oh Lord, they're attractive. Youth is attractive. I often say that now that I'm older and realize what youth means. But anyway, I would be kinder to yourself unless you were acting on it. That's if we're hearing the whole story.
Well, there was more, but basically, I think you very much answered the question. So we've got more. I'll proceed. So then I'll put this in. Answered. Okay. This one is you got to scroll up a little bit. I'm a 39-year-old SA of 32 years and married. So just so you know, if you're putting questions in the chat, we're not going to get to them. I'm going to stick to the Q&A. So I'm a 39-year-old SA of 32 years and married. My wife has known of my addiction since we started dating approximately 12 years now. She has been reticent to do group therapy support for her trauma. Do you have any recommendations for me to help her try a group, or am I SOL and just have to be patient for her in her own recovery?
Well, 12 years is a very long time. So I think 12 years goes way beyond the issues of sex addiction or sexual acting out. I mean, I don't know why this person would be in therapy. I mean, it sounds like there are some reasons why you think that she should, but I'm not sure it has so much. Oh, you've been dating 12 years. So again, I don't understand. I'm an SA of 32 years and married. Okay, you're 30, a 39-year-old SA of 32 years. What does that mean, Tammy?
I'm a 39-year-old sex addict of 32 years and married. So I mean, I think that is, I've been a sex addict for since under 10, but I guess I don't know that for sure. But
Okay, I'm not sure.
so
Thank you,
let's
because
just
you
go with it.
clarified
Yeah,
for my
yeah,
sanity.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I would, again, if my spouse had known about this for 5 or 6 years and they'd never done anything about it, I would assume that they've learned to live with it or move beyond it. I don't know why you want your spouse to be in therapy, or couples work with you, but I doubt the sole issue, even if she's married or withdrawing or distant, or I doubt the sole issue after all of these years has much to do um, with sexual acting out. I mean, that's right. Since she knew about my dating. I mean, it doesn't say that you acted out recently or you stopped, so yeah, I think there might be other issues there is the best I can answer. And by the way, it says, do I just have to be patient with her in recovery? If this wasn't within the last 2 years that she discovered this, then I don't think what she's dealing with is her recovery. That may be part of it, but there's probably more there.
Yeah, and this is one of those where, even if she's unwilling to get support, for betrayal trauma or whatever, but like clearly you guys are not aligned. So it may be time for you to have a qualified couples therapist work on, just some basic relationship communication. I mean, I have a feeling things are not quite lining up. So getting some support for your relationship may be worthwhile. So. Next question. I know this question has been asked before, but are sex addicts sociopaths and as they display all of the traits of one?
Well, actually, I don't think that addicts are necessarily sociopaths. I think we're quite narcissistic in our behavior, but and even that is temporary. I've often said, you can be an active heroin addict and steal your, Tam, you'll have to correct me on this or not. You can be an active heroin addict and steal your kid's college fund to get your drugs, but sober, and in a sober life, you might work 3 jobs to repay that child's college fund. So to me, the act of being an addict is narcissistic in and of itself, because we are the most important thing, and what we're using or doing is more important. If I am more interested in acting out with sex workers than understanding how that's going to hurt you, then obviously it's narcissistic because I'm putting what I want to do over our relationship. However, I don't believe that sex addicts are sociopaths, and I think to say that is to not understand the word sociopath. To be a narcissist is to lack empathy. But we have remorse. You really show us what we did and we'll feel bad about it. We may feel bad about it in terms of, I wish I wasn't that guy or gal. We may not necessarily feel bad for you, but we will feel remorseful. And it is through that remorse, whether I hurt you or I hurt myself or I hurt my kids, or it is through that remorse that I can motivate people to recovery, because they don't want to feel that way again. And they don't want to hurt people like they have once they realize what they've done. That is a narcissistic person. We do not necessarily feel empathy. I can hurt people and let them down, but when I realize what I've done, I feel bad and I want to fix it on some level. Sociopathic people are different. They do not feel empathy. They can do things that they know is going to hurt someone, but they also have no remorse. They feel not very badly about it. And if they do, it's superficial. And sociopaths are people that I really can't work with, even if they show up for treatment and look like they want to work, because they do not have the capacity for remorse. I can hurt you, and if you get really upset about it, I'll just move on to someone else because you're making life difficult. Not, do I need to look at myself because I feel badly about hurting you? That is more of an addict. So I think, and I'll just go on for a second. I'll be done in a second, Tammy. I've probably seen at least 800-900 people in my career, and maybe more than that. And I can tell you of the 80% of them who were men, I think I had 3 or 4 sociopaths over all those years, maybe 5. So it's not common for someone to be a sociopath. It's not common for somebody to be, I think I've worked maybe with 5 or 6 full-on narcissists. And boy, do you know when you know those people in the room, because when you've done it for a very long time, you realize the lights are not on, nobody's home, even though they may look that way. But it's a really deep feeling. When I sit with someone who's sociopathic, I can feel the hairs on the back of my neck go up. But I've had 20 years of training, 25. So I'm just saying that the traits that we often use in pop culture to say, oh, she's a narcissist, or really are not. People who really have those issues is so much bigger. I'm not saying every sociopath is in prison, but it's rare for someone to be full-on sociopathic and struggle in the way you talk about. So with a spouse and all that. Tammy, you've heard this question before.
Yeah, well, but I have one more thing to add. It's like, and it requires comprehensive and qualified assessment. Like even within our treatment program, not everybody needs to have a psychological or psychiatric evaluation, but some do. And then we have someone who's a professional that provides unmute. I have
Sorry,
no idea
Tammy,
what happened.
it signed me out. I mean, it didn't just turn it off, it
I
signed me
think it
out.
was me. I think because all of a sudden I think I left, but I'm
You
going to make
signed
you
me out?
I know. I think everybody left. So I'm going to
Oh,
change you to, yeah, no, I think it was the whole thing.
well, we
So
have 60 people in here, so yes.
I know, I apologize, but I'm going to make you co-host. So if it happens to me again, that
Okay.
you should be able to continue. So now let's go back to the questions.
We
So
don't have any. They're all
yes, I
mine, and they're
do.
all gone. Oh, okay,
Oh, well, I'm on it. So,
go for it.
all right. So I'm going to do this and hit done, and then I'm put it in the answered. So the next one is, you've said sex addiction is an intimacy disorder. Oh, wait, no, I got to do the one before it. So let's
Well,
start with the one before it.
okay.
So how soon after an impact letter is presented should I present my restitution letter?
Tammy, why don't you answer that question? Because I mean, my response would just be, it depends on the relationship, it depends on the situation, it depends on how it went after disclosure. I mean, I don't think that I could give a fixed time to that. So Tammy, do you have
No, I'm actually with you, because they're, like if it's just like, well, you need to do it in 2 days. Well, then have you really taken it in? Have you really thought about what it is? I would say whatever your qualified therapists are suggesting, follow their guidelines. They should be the ones that are helping you guide the process. This is not do it yourself at home. So whatever their suggestions are, they've got a plan, they've got the training. I would follow what their guidelines are. So
may I throw one more thing out there?
yes, please.
I agree with you completely. If I were writing a restitution letter, it would be 3 pages, single-sided, double-spaced, because I've seen people write 11-page restitution letters, and really that to me sounds like you feel more guilty than you actually want to clean this up. So, please forgive. How many ways can you say, please forgive me, and I'm so sorry, and I didn't mean it? And if, by the way, in a restitution letter, someone starts saying a lot things like, but I never knew I was a sex addict, or you have no idea how much I love you, or any of those manipulative things, then that letter's not ready to go out, just to say it. Now we
Yeah.
get to ask that other question, Tammy.
Yes. You've said sex addiction is an intimacy disorder. My husband of 23 years of marriage has always been there for intimacy sex. Sex is not intimacy. So does this mean I was objectified and it was not real intimacy?
So I think Tammy just answered it. Intimacy is one form of, sorry, sex is one form of intimacy, but what it is to be intimate is to be open to someone and vulnerable. If I tell Tammy, my mother's very ill and I haven't let you know this, but I think she might pass soon, I'm being very intimate. I'm letting Tammy know something that maybe I wouldn't tell someone else, but I trust her enough to say something warm and kind. If I was intimate with someone, if I was intimate with Tammy and I said, "Oh, Tammy, my mom's really ill," and she said, "Well, that's interesting, but let's get back to work," I wouldn't be intimate with her anymore because I wouldn't feel safe. But intimacy is the quality of letting yourself be known, whatever's going on with you, whatever, so that people generally want to get closer to you. So one of the reasons that sex addicts have non-intimate lives is because we do not open up about who we are, what's going on with us. We keep secrets, and therefore we cannot receive the gift of your intimacy because we are lying to you. So I really wanted to answer that question, so I'm glad it came back. Tammy, do you have a thought about that?
Well, I do in that, I mean, to say it was always this way or never that way or whatever, it's like, it's really one of those things where I think if he's really working on recovery, if he's really working on changing, you will see a difference. You will feel connected in a very different way. We talk often on this webinar and Dr. David's and things about non-sex touching, and that's a very intimate communication as well without sex. I just really believe that you'll start feeling, like you'll go, oh yeah, we really are connected. So, okay,
There was
go
one
ahead.
more thing I wanted to
Mhm,
say about that, but maybe I'll just say this. Tammy, you mentioned Dr. David's talk. So can you just say
mhm.
what that is? Because people don't really necessarily know what you're talking about. I do.
Sure. Yeah, on this particular platform, we have a number of webinars, including Dr. David Fawcett's, which is Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific time, and he talks about co-occurring sex addiction and chemical dependency, but he answers a lot of questions as well. So it's another webinar format that you can join. But he also, like Dr. Rob, is a trained clinical sexologist. So they look at sexual health and sexual healing, not just the sex addiction components. And it's how to restore a relationship. So.
And we have enough trust in Dr. Fawcett that he treats our clients on a regular basis. He has a podcast. He's just really, if you have any interest in the drug piece or the alcohol piece, I'm sort of the sex and intimacy guy. He's sort of the sex and drugs and alcohol guy. And that's why we run a treatment program together. That's why Seeking Integrity is both of us working together, because we cover both of those areas. So Tammy said 5 o'clock on what day did you
Wednesday,
say? And we
PM
don't
on
charge.
Pacific time. So yeah.
This stuff is all free, just like this. So I just wanted to mention it because Dr. Fawcett is really great. I'm sorry, Tammy.
Yes.
Thank you for that
No,
announcement.
no, like there are so many resources on sexandrelationshiphealing.com. If you're finding this on YouTube, I would invite you, sexandrelationshiphealing.com, all spelled out. But there are the live versions of the webinars. There's drop-in groups for both those betrayed partners as well as those struggling with compulsive behavior, male or female. And podcasts. Dr. Rob's Sex, Love, and Addiction has had over 750,000 downloads on that particular series, and that's just one of the podcasts we have. So tons of resources for you to help you find qualified expert answers to questions. So, okay,
No
next
cost.
question. At no cost, yes. And then we do have the work groups on seekingintegrity.com too. So to check those out. Thank you too for all you do. Almost 21 months in from discovery, disclosure 16 months ago. SA husband finished step 4, fighting with continued denial and minimization from hubby. He has CSAT weekly, attends 3 to 4 12-step classes a week, yet still won't share. Keeps his recovery work very secret, hesitant to communicate at all, fear of feeling bad or looking bad. How do I get him to share, knowing if he doesn't, it's just another secret or lie he keeps from me? Trust cannot be built.
Well, I'm fighting with continued denial and minimization. I don't know what that's about, whether it's about lying about acting out, or whether the person is still acting out. I'm not sure what they're minimizing if they disclosed. In other words, Tammy, what I read is something has happened between 16 months ago and now that doesn't make this person feel safe, even though they're going to meetings, even though they did disclosure. Keep his recovery work secret. I think you could mention something about that too, Tammy. Hesitate to communicate at all, feeling fear of looking bad or of feeling bad or looking bad, which is a narcissistic trait, by the way. How do I get him to share? Get him to share. I'm gonna point that again. How do I get him to share? Knowing that if he doesn't, it's just another secret or lie he keeps from me. Trust cannot be built. So Tammy, can you start with that? Because it's it sounds very big, like kind of like you said, black or white or red or
Yeah. So my first challenge was disclosure was 16 months ago, and he's on step 4. And like if he's only written step 4, hasn't done step 5, hasn't done 6, 7, 8, 9, like the first 9 are when the promises start coming true, which if he's going to the meetings, he'll know what that means. But it's one of those things where he's choosing to be stuck in the quicksand. In my book, it's like writing your 4th step is challenging, and doing the 5th step starts the healing process. You're sharing with somebody else, getting validation that you are not the worst person in the planet, all of those type of things. So it feels like he's stuck. I'm also going like, this may be one of those where you need a professional therapist for the 2 of you, because it's, again, communication, seems to be stuck. And maybe having an outside professional going, this pattern that you're doing, him not saying anything, you getting frustrated, it continues to deteriorate any possibility of building trust. It may take some outside help.
Yeah, I wanted to add that a lot of people, this is exactly what we mean by intimacy disorder. This person practically wrote the dictionary definition, which is the person's acting out, but they're not any closer. They're not more intimate. In other words, he's not revealing himself. He's not sharing. He's not opening up. That's what intimacy is. And by the way, intimate relationships lead to sex for many of us. That's how healthy sexuality occurs, is through this mutual trust that's built by sharing. But anyway, what you may be running into, and I just crossed my mind, is, sometimes when we are acting out, people that we love will say they are not available because of all that acting out, or now that I understand what they were doing, now I think they're going to be closer and more intimate. And we may have no more ability to be intimate after we stop acting out than before. And I agree, Tammy talked about getting some couples therapy. I think this is when you walk in and say, I'm frustrated, we don't seem to be hearing each other, what do we do about it, or how do we figure this out? Yeah, I was going to say something. Yes. So, and by the way, trust in my mind is behavior. Trust it's someone behaviors that helps me rebuild trust. It's not what they say, it's what they do. So, when someone's going to meetings, going to a right therapist, going to 3 or 4 meetings a week, just because they don't share doesn't mean that it is impossible to rebuild trust around acting out. You may have a better answer than me, Tammy. I'm not sure.
No, but my concern is it's really easy to go sit and it's really easy to go sit in a meeting and not really do anything. I mean, there are people, unfortunately, who go to meetings for years and years and don't really make any progress, that and continue to like just hang on. So but I hear you not being okay with settling for that, so like I said, but possibly having a professional intervene may be useful. So the next question: I have been in an affair for almost a year. I broke it off 2 months ago, but shortly after we went back to sexting and talking often. We met up one time, but I'm trying hard not to see him again. I know the sexting is wrong. I don't want to lose my marriage and family, but I'm struggling so hard to stay away from this person. I think about them all the time, and my interactions with him affect my mood. Please give me some advice to break free of this person I'm addicted to.
Okay, well, I think this is kind of easy. I mean, it's never easy to do, but I think the answer is fairly easy. You do want to lose your marriage. You do. You said twice, I don't want to lose my marriage. I don't break up my marriage. Yeah, you do. Because if you're doing things on a regular basis, they're going to break up your marriage. I think it's denial to say, well, but I really love my spouse. And no, you don't. If you really understood what a problem this is, and you really have been here where you've heard spouses in pain, you would say, I'll do anything to make sure that my spouse doesn't get hurt and I don't lose the relationship. You're not doing anything. We appreciate the questions, and I apologize for my sarcasm, but I mean it. This is not somebody who says, I absolutely adore my spouse and I don't want this to break up. If you're doing, look, if you said, I don't want to get fat, and you ate cookies all day long, you're going to get fat, even if you say, but I don't want to. So to me, this is kind of classic denial, in the sense of saying, well, I really want this, but I'm going to do that. That's cake and eat it too stuff. We don't get to have that. And you know what? You could choose the other one. Go ahead, choose the affair partner and have that, and say goodbye to your spouse and get a divorce or whatever it is. But you have to be responsible for one or the other. You can't play with both, or you might lose both. Tammy, I'm going to run to the restroom real quick, but I like that answer. Do you have any for yourself?
I'm glad he muted. That's all I was going to say, is make sure you mute. So yeah, I was actually looking at this of, I don't hear, I'm glad you're here, but I don't hear, and here's what I'm doing to not do that. Like, are you connecting with the drop-in groups? Are you going to a 12-step? Do you have a therapist? I mean, did you block the number? I mean, get a different phone number. I don't know. I know for sure, for me, if all I do is focus on the cookies, like Dr. Rob, if all I do is focus on the cookies, I can't have them, I can't have them, I can't have them. Well, I absolutely want the cookies the most. So what are you doing to focus on your relationship with your spouse? What are you doing to focus on your family? I mean, what are you doing to do things differently? Because doing the same thing over and over again produces the same results. But I hear you, is like, and my interactions with him affect my mood. And I'm not sure you can be addicted to a person. You said, I'm addicted to this person, and I'm not 100% that I agree with that, but I absolutely get the dopamine, the rush of like,
Excitement.
this person is, yes, this is exciting. And then there's my marriage, but this is exciting and risky. And like, I've got so much on the line, and then there's my marriage, so I think you get to choose the cookies or the marriage,
the protein.
yeah.
I do want to say, first of all, what was I going to say to you, that it's very easy to compare. It's very easy to compare a marriage to an affair and find the affair more attractive.
Oh,
You don't
yeah.
have to do laundry. They probably don't fart as much. They probably may look they look different. You don't have to fight about what you're having for dinner or who's going to take care of the kids. It is so much easier. It's like going on vacation and then being home. Which would I rather do? I'd rather be on vacation, but there's nothing there for me. Where everything of value lies is at home. And I'll say this to you, maybe you don't realize what life is about. Life is about the foundation that we create with another person, whatever, or two people for some of us, but it's the foundation that we create, the place we go back to, the place we want to go when we die, the place we most want to come to and say, guess what happened to me today? That is the foundation of our lives. And if you think that distractions are the foundation of your lives, you'll never be happy. Oh, by the way, Tam, I have to tell you one more thing. We used to do a lot of conferences together. I've run into you all the time, even though we work for different organizations. And I spoke a lot, right? So sometimes if I had to stand on the stage and I realized, oh my goodness, I have to pee before we start this event, just one time I forgot to turn the mic off, and there were 300 people in the room. And that's how I learned never to do that again.
And I appreciate that. So one of the things, would you, before we go, because you talk about intensity and intimacy, could you?
Sure. Tammy, I think, named a great way of thinking about addiction, period, and certainly sex addiction, which is, or affairs, which is, we choose intensity, we choose the excitement and the distraction, and when what we really want is intimacy and a relationship. In fact, I would say that every human being longs for connection and relationship. I would also say most sex addicts are broken. We have intimacy disorders. So when we get close to the person we care about, a part of us runs away, and we block ourselves from really connecting to you. And then when that affair partner is there, it seems like anything can happen and we're completely open, but that isn't real. We have trouble being intimate with people that we care about, but we have no problem getting into intensity with people that we don't. And guess who can't hurt us? The person with whom we have the intensity. They let me down, they disappoint me, I'll just find somebody else. If you let me down, if you hurt me, if you use me, that's going to be devastating, because we are intimate. So it's much easier to be intimate with a stranger, even though we're not much there to get for yourself.
Okay, next question. Sex addict here, male 37. I have been discovered progressively by my girlfriend through the last year. I'm struggling with sex addiction for over a decade with prostitutes combined with the use of ecstasy or cocaine. Last year, it was under control for 6 months, and then I acted out just once a month for over the last 6 months. I showed all to my girlfriend, and she's completely traumatized. I am looking for treatment, but what can I suggest for her healing?
Well, let me first
Your
say, like,
treatment, your
if you're
treatment.
looking, I'm sorry, Tammy had something to say.
Yeah.
If you are going to treatment, please come to see us. I was going to say this a little bit earlier. We do run a treatment center. It's called Seeking Integrity, seekingintegrity.com. I am there a couple of days a week, and we do really great work. And we don't mention it much here, but if you're looking for treatment, please look no further than us. And the reason we provide all of this, one of the gifts to us in providing, is not only to help all of you, but once in a while, someone comes to go to treatment, and out of 100 of you, that pays for all the free stuff we do. So just to say that. And us in particular, because you're using drugs and sex. And the problem is with many drug addicts, most, they might have a sexual or intimacy problem, and they go to the drug addiction treatment center and they learn all about not drinking and using, but they don't look at how they ended up there and what happened to them intimately, sexually, whatever that is. And so this is why Dr. Fawcett and I work together. He's the drug guy, I'm the intimacy and addiction guy, sex addiction. And together we're looking at both, which I think is kind of unique for a lot of programs. In any case, Tammy, can you answer the part about girlfriend, spouse? Not that I couldn't, but I think it'd be a great one to hear. I've said enough.
Yeah, it's one of those, like, and I've said it on the webinars before, you focusing on her healing isn't helpful, and it's just a distraction. It's like, oh, I'm going to focus on helping her heal. You getting help so that you can show up and be a person of integrity, so that you aren't traumatizing her by using ecstasy and cocaine and prostitutes and everything else. And so how you rebuild trust is you show up and you don't lie. And our clinical director consistently says, tell the truth and tell it faster, because addicts lie about everything. It isn't just about, did you use cocaine or ecstasy, or did you use a prostitute? It's like, I took out the trash. No, you didn't, it's whatever. But you learning to be a person of integrity, then she can start to learn to heal. But it's going to take she's going to be behind you, because she's got to wait and see that you actually are trustworthy, because you saying it isn't going to prove it. Dr. Rob talked a little while ago about actions. It's really about your actions. But email me, Tammy, Tami, at seekingintegrity.com, or call me on the company line, and I will be happy to answer questions about treatment.
By the way, we make referrals to therapists all the time. We do not get kickbacks, because you often hear us say, if you're looking for good couples, it's only that we know who people are. Between Tammy and I, we pretty much know most of the people who know what they're doing, because we've been through training a lot of people and supporting them. So we refer just because we know who to refer to. And there's a lot of less than perfect therapists out there. The other thing I wanted to say about, and maybe you said this, maybe I completely missed it, Tammy, was about this case, this situation, is that I get under control for 6 months and then I act out once a month. And I'm thinking, why would you expect her to not be traumatized and be in her healing? Every 6 months, she is, you pull out that bat and you hit her over the head, and then you say, well, it's been 5 months. Why isn't she better? And then she knows the bat's going to come out and hit her. She knows when you're not doing right, and she can feel all that. So again, I just want to reinforce Tammy said, before you get so worried about her healing, you're never going to have her heal or feel better while you're still struggling like this. And that is what treatment is for. And by the way, when people go into treatment, we work with their spouses. They have their own dedicated family specialist. We support you guys. And that's something I think we've learned to do well over time. In other words, you don't have to take care of it. You have to do your part and lead spouses to where they need to go for support, which is kind of what we do. They want it. They need it. Once they understand that they didn't cause this.
So the next question, what do you think about EMDR therapy and mindfulness practices to help with addiction?
I think that people who do various practices that they're very passionate about will tell you that they help everything. The person who does X kind of therapy, psychodrama, will tell you that everything can be resolved through psychodrama. And the person who does Internal family systems will tell you that everything can be resolved through internal family systems. So I have worked with some folks who I really appreciate in the kinds of EMDR they do, who have done things like said, I believe that EMDR can resolve addiction, and they're wrong. EMDR may reduce some of the shame. It may reduce some of the, if there's trauma triggers under there, like something happens during the day and it did get overwhelmed. So some of the triggers to trauma or that might set me running into fear and addiction, those can be dealt with. EMDR is much more about focusing on a particular issue or a particular memory than it is therapy in general. So I look at EMDR like I look at equine therapy or psychodrama or art therapy or what I would call a ancillary would be the word I would use. It's in addition to primary therapy, but it isn't primary therapy. And there is no evidence that EMDR profoundly affects or would stop addiction. Maybe affects to some degree, would not stop addiction.
I think all of those things are tools that you can use to help with the triggers. Mindfulness. There are times when I'm stressed, and just grounding and I'm intentional about feeling my feet on the ground, and just the focus of doing that, it relieves things, in the moment. So just learning a few techniques that take me out of the, is super helpful. So I've done EMDR. It was super helpful for dealing with some trauma things, but it didn't fix my addiction. And it couldn't have been the primary. If somebody started doing EMDR on me right off the bat, that probably wouldn't have gone well. I needed the foundation of addiction support. I needed tools to use to just not act out. And then I can deal with the rest of it. So.
And I'm sorry, Tammy, I didn't see the second part. I was so focused on therapy and EMDR. Meditation is a part of what is recommended in recovery. It's actually in the old timey books from AA is they talk about meditation. And I think what they're talking about is either thinking about reflecting on certain things that have value and meaning, or in the more Buddhist sense of breathing and breath work. And, if I were more willing to meditate every morning, I bet I'd be a nicer guy. And I absolutely believe that. Doesn't mean I wouldn't act out, but I would be more thoughtful about it. Sorry.
No, I have during COVID, one of the things that was recommended to me, and I've continued to do that, was a meditation practice. And so I have apps. There's apps for everything. So I have apps, and I do those apps before I go for a run or do anything else in my day. And that helps me settle in. So, it's not going to keep me from acting out if I really choose to, but man, just having that to start my day and being intentional about it was helpful. So.
And just to comment, mindfulness and meditation practices have nothing to do with religion. They can be carried out within religion, but the most secular person can enjoy and learn from those things.
Yes. So the next question, I'm a single gay man who has never had a long-term relationship. I'm currently in treatment for my fused sex and drug addiction, and I am having a hard time relating to the spousal betrayal dynamic that seems to be predominant in the stories of straight peers and the questions posed on this webinar. How would you suggest I better relate to support my peers and not get into the isolated, I'm different mindset that has kept me sick for so long? That's a great question.
Well, first, I wrote a book about this called Cruise Control, Understanding Gay Men and Sex Addiction. And there's in fact, I'm the only person to have written about gay men and sex addiction. And that book's been revised, and it's probably helpful for you. And the reason is that there's a whole chapter on how you work with a spouse and how you deal with issues when you're from a different culture than heterosexual people are. I come from gay culture, which has a lot, and because it is predominantly in the public space, not so much in the private space, it's 50-50, but out there in the clubs and the bars, and men are much busier out there, and they're much busier hooking up for casual sex. It's not that the ladies aren't, but you don't see it quite as overtly. So there's a very open sense of lots of sexuality and lots of physicality, and these men kind of strutting around like roosters. And so that means that you have to try to get sober around sex in an environment where sex is very different than the heterosexual community. It's much more casual. It's kind of like trying to get sober from alcohol in a bar. You sit around the bar and you really don't know, everyone's drinking. So who's the alcoholic? Well, if you're a gay person in a gay community, lots of people are having sex with their friends, like it or not. So, and then going to dinner and then having them meet their boyfriends. And I don't think that world has changed entirely. So I can't speak to you about, first of all, I would not use the unhappiness of my spouse or any unhappiness that someone has provided to someone else's spouse as a problem in my relationship. I don't relate to relationship betrayal. Um, and I understand that some people will say, I'm a gay guy, and I don't care how many people I want to have sex with. But here's the other side of it. How close do you want to be to him? How deeply do you want to connect with this person? Um, do you plan on exploring and exposing every time you're non-monogamous? Because then let me put it this way, being a sex addict means we have to modulate our sexual behavior no matter what. It doesn't really matter if it hurts my spouse or they don't care. By the way, I have never met a spouse yet, gay or straight, who on some level doesn't worry just a little bit about what's going on out there. Because I know, and to you, if people have affairs and even short-term ones, you have a problem. And let me tell you what it is that you're going to have a lot of great fun out there, however many times you have it, until you run into the person who's interesting to you. And you will. And then you're going to want to see them more, and you're going to have feelings for them because that's just human. And then you're going to be caught emotionally between this person you're having an affair with and this person that you care about. Also, I will say that there's a difference in having casual sex in the gay community. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to be in bathhouses and sex clubs and picking people up on apps and meeting in parks. And, there are ways to have an open relationship if that's what you really want. And I wrote about it in Cruise Control, but it does involve secrecy and hiding and living a double life. And I guess I'll say one more thing about that. I think addiction is a lot about living a double life and compartmentalizing parts of myself. So are there other people in the world who really mean something to me, who are important to me, who don't know that I'm out there 3 nights a week having sex with other people? I'm not saying you have to tell everyone about your sex life, but I do think that if you want to be more intimate with the people you care about, especially your spouse, you may consider that this is not that important. And I guess I'll say one more thing about that. How old are you? Because when you get a little bit older, you realize that sex is just a piece of the larger pie. And sex is nice and sex is fun, but maybe what you might have with your spouse, if you look at it differently with them. By the way, it doesn't mean your spouse isn't longing and dying for you to be sober and change your behavior. They may just not tell you. Tammy, were you making a tea, or did you want to
I
move on to the
was,
next
because it says
question?
I'm a single gay man who has never had a long-term relationship. So
Okay, so I
I
spoke to
love
all the
what you
gay men in
shared.
relationships.
Yes, I love what you shared, but I would like you to now hone in on this person is in treatment and there are heterosexual couples and there's a lack of identifying, and I want you to speak to that, and I have a thought on it too. So
Why don't you start?
okay, my thought was like the lack of connection. Even in a heterosexual relationship, there's still a lack of connection. But I bet you could learn a lot of what not to do from the people that are around you. It's like, okay, they're not doing relationships well. If you want to learn to be in a relationship and you want to do it well, we do want healthy connection and intimacy, real intimacy. What can you look at and learn to do differently? So rather than holding yourself as I'm so different and no one can relate to me, I bet there's a lot you can learn from your peers and they can learn from you. So I would invite you to learn to be connected to them in a very different way. So
Now
please.
I really want to answer this question. And thank you, Tammy.
Yes.
You can do this sooner, by the way, if you
Yeah.
find that
Well, it was really
you're
good and interesting, but it wasn't quite answering the question. So
okay. You're single. You are single. What do you mean you don't relate to the spousal betrayal? Of course you don't. You don't have a relationship. But if you wanted one, maybe you would understand the depth to which someone becomes committed to you and what it might mean to them. To say, and I will go back on everything I said, to say that all gay men just don't care whether you have sex with other people and all gay relationships is insulting to me, who's been in a 20-year relationship. And we don't run around saying, oh, we're gay, we'll have sex with everyone we want. I know many, did I say many? Monogamous, committed gay relationships, many more than I know ones that are open. So this assumption, which I think is prejudice, to say, well, all gay men do this, and maybe you've been hanging out in the bars and the sex clubs a little too much and not enough with healthy, loving people who are in intimate relationships who aren't looking to sleep with the world. Now, are there people who have open relationships? That's up to them. But to be out in the world thinking, oh, all gay men are like this and you can't relate to these people because you're single. Sorry,
Well,
Tammy.
but also I haven't been in a long-term relationship, and I would
Right.
invite you to be really looking at what is that keeps you from being able to commit, and it could be we talk about having a defective picker. You might, as an active addict, be not picking good people, that you really should have in your life for the long term. And Dr. Rob has talked, about dating and all that. That's longer down right now. Focus on getting sobriety. How do you not act out? How do you stop these patterns? And then later relationship issues. But my goal for you would to be able to have a long-term relationship, if that's something that you'd be interested in, because having somebody like Dr. Rob shared, having somebody committed in your life who's there for you even during COVID, is, like that's a gift. That's my recovery in progress. So
I
okay,
want to add one more thing to this,
please.
which is this idea that how can I not be isolated and relate to my peers? You have something very in your common with these peers, which is you all have a problem with sex and compulsive behavior. That's where you relate to them. It doesn't matter whether there's someone who's a king and someone who's a pauper. We share that room because we share a problem. And I would suggest to you that many people go to a 12-step meeting, they go to one or two, and they look for the worst people in the room or the people they don't relate to, and they say, oh, I don't belong here because I'm not like that person. And then they don't get the whole point, which is the connection and healing that comes no matter who that person is. So I'm concerned that maybe you're someone who is like this in life, that you're more interested in, that you keep yourself alone and not in relationship because you look for the differences between you and other people. When I send someone to a 12-step meeting, I ask them to look for the commonalities, not the differences. Because all day long I can say, well, you're not like me and you're not like me, and that will keep me very alone.
And I can guarantee I've never heard of one person in all my years who has the exact same story of how they ended up in recovery as I do. It doesn't matter. I can relate to them on the feelings and the feeling of loneliness, even if they're in a relationship, the feeling of loneliness, the feeling that addiction is taking away, stealing my opportunity for happiness and joy in life. I mean, those are the things that I can relate. When somebody's sharing the pain of addiction, I can relate. When they are sharing the joy of recovery, I can relate. So absolutely look for where you can connect, be open to it, not just checking off, well, they don't, they're not like me. They are. You're in the
I got
same
to add one
place.
more thing. When you were in the dating process, how do you know how many people you dated that you let down or that you hurt or were disappointed in you because you weren't meeting some value that they expected, or they knew you were flirting with someone else while you were with them? How many people have been disappointed in you because you weren't the person they wanted you to be because you didn't know how to do this? Okay,
And you
let's
can
move on.
learn. Yes.
And you
So
can learn.
what are your thoughts on neurofeedback and neurofeedback meditation practices to help with addiction?
Hmm. Tammy, you've worked with a lot of neurofeedback people, more than me, probably, maybe in the
I was going to
conferences. And
say not so much. I really don't have a lot to offer on that one. So
all right, so let me just say that I think that, and we talked about this, that many, many modalities, secondary modalities like neurofeedback, like somatic therapies, like EMDR, like these are things that I might, well, I know this when I worked at a treatment center not that long ago. We had a neurofeedback specialist, and they had equipment, and they had meditation. I mean, it was a fancy place. A couple of times a week, we would send them to see the person to work on neurofeedback and what we call brain spotting. But that was not the primary piece of their work. So if it helps you, great. If it reduces your stress and anxiety to act out and leaves you feeling more comfortable about yourself, great. Will any of these things keep you from being an active addict? No, because that's something you have to deal with directly and head on, no matter what else you add to it.
So the next question, Dr. Rob, please clarify your response to the previous question regarding arousal to underage. I found my husband Googling and fantasizing shirtless boys. Barely legal porn has been his issue. Is it my understanding from what I understand you saying, as long as they don't act on it, it's not a concern?
So this would be an example of how something I've said can be, in my mind, blown so out of proportion with the person's fear and concerns about their own situation that now everyone's going to think I run around and say that you can touch 12-year-olds or something. And I've had that happen. So I appreciate your asking because I want to clarify. It is not unusual for someone walking down the street to see an attractive young person who's 16 and say, who's got cleavage down to here, and say, wow, that person is attractive. That is very different than someone who's going online deliberately to seek out underage people. Very different thing. I might notice at the beach that people are having sex, and I might think, oh, wow, that looks kind of exciting. I better not look at that. But that doesn't mean I go online and look for people who are having sex. So we will run into things in our lives out there that feel shameful. Like, oh my God, I just found out that our babysitter is 16 and I thought she was 20. It happens. And in other words, we will see people in the world who are fully developed and underage, and we might find them attractive, but to go seek them out online or in real life is not okay. And it is something to be very much concerned about, because you go to jail for that stuff.
Well, and I think that there's a difference between a normal, healthy person, and then someone who struggles with this type of behavior. I mean, like going back to the alcohol analogy, is it okay for me to sit there and watch as somebody's drinking a drink? I don't need that mental energy. Then it's, as long as I don't drink it, it's okay. No, I just don't need the negative headspace. So for me, I have given up the right to be sitting there ogling a drink and thinking how good it would taste and all. I mean, I just don't do that. A normal person could go, gosh, that looks fantastic. Great. So I think that there's different categories too. For those of us in recovery, we have to be extra vigilant about, we've talked before about the 3-second rule of and it's like thought gone, not I'm going on Google and looking at barely legal things.
But and you're right, Tammy, and I want to add one little thing to this, because there's another concerning thing in here, which is kind of buried, which is I found my husband Googling and fantasizing shirtless boys. And I wonder, what's going on, what is his real interest? Forget the underage part. I mean, for the moment, is he interested in men? Is he interested in women? How does he act out? Is he bisexual? How does it affect the real life? Maybe he doesn't just look at pictures. So for me, as a married woman to a man, I would wonder, how much do I know about this? How much have we talked about this? What does it mean to me and to him that he's interested in men? And although he may be looking at shirtless boys, they're men, they're not women. And so what is his orientation? What does that mean for your relationship? I don't know, but to me, that is a very significant question that would be easy to kind of go by in here with a larger issue, but that would be my concern as well.
So what are the guidelines for, should I stay or should I go? What do I need to see that he is really substantively doing? My husband is enmeshed for 54 years with his mom. We are married for 28. He was sexually acting out with the same hooker for 14 years. How can he effectively divorce his mother? What boundaries are needed for a sexualized and romanticized mom, i.e. sleep in one bed on vacation and go to naked beach designed for lovers together? Thank you.
Well, you're not my client, and so I don't want to take this on with too much intensity, because I don't know you, and it's a very serious question. I will say this: someone who sexually acts out with the same sex worker for 14 years is not seeing a hooker, they're having an affair. You don't see somebody for 14 years and say, well, we just get together for sex and I don't know your name. That might happen once or twice, but so I would say to you that there's probably a lot more that's been in that relationship than simply paying for sex. By the way, I don't know what your financial situation is, but if someone has seen somebody regularly and paid them, even at a low fee, which is $100 a visit, a lot of the men I work with don't think about, is my kid's college fund funded? What would my spouse and I have done with that money? How might we put it in our retirement, or whatever it is? You don't have to be broke to realize that your spouse could have spent thousands of dollars on your relationship they spent on sex workers. So the first part of the question is a little different than the second part, and I wouldn't necessarily put them together. The fact that he has an enmeshed mother he does icky things with may have nothing to do, or very much to do with the fact he's having an affair with a sex worker. So I wouldn't necessarily conflate those, because I'm not sure they come together. However, in what I call an enmeshed relationship, it's over emotional involvement. I had an enmeshed relationship with my mother. That means I was her best friend. She leaned on me for everything. She would tell me how unhappy she was with my own father. When she wanted to go to the theater or something, my father didn't want to go. I was her date. That's an enmeshed relationship. She leaned more on me emotionally than I leaned on her. That's how it was set up. She was not strong enough to take care of herself, and she leaned into me. But an incestuous relationship is something very different. And when you have nudity between an adult parent and a child, when they're going to, well, let me just say this. I've been in Germany. I've been in other countries where the whole family goes to the steam room and there's mama and grandpa and sister. And there are other cultures where people, they go to the sauna or they go swimming and nudity is not even thought of. But this sounds like something very different, sexualized, romanticized, sleeping in bed on vacation, going to nature beaches. So this is incest. This is not simply enmeshment because there is physical and sexualized activity going on between these two people. So I don't know whether you should stay or go. I don't know anything about that, but I certainly would be calling something what it is. And we're not simply talking about enmeshment here. This is a much more serious issue than enmeshment, this one here. And I'd be seeing a therapist and saying, I think my mother-in-law and my husband are incestuous with each other. And I've seen it and I'm terrified and traumatized by this. I would stay or go more on how I feel and what I'm able to tolerate, because what is going on with them is just plain troubled, and there's no other word you can give for it.
And it is challenging to unpack all of that when it's been going on for 54 years. So I'm like, I'm so sorry. That one just is so heartbreaking. So we didn't get, there's a lot of questions that we didn't get to.
We answered 15 of them, Tammy.
I know. I'm really sorry. And so please join us again. And Dr. David will be on Wednesday night at 5. And there's just lots of opportunities throughout the week for both drop-in and webinars on sexandrelationshiphealing.com. And you can email me if you're looking for resources, Tammy, TAMI @seekingintegrity.com. Thank you all so much.
Have a good evening.
Bye, Dr. Rob.
Bye for now, guys. Bye, Tammy. Be well.